Okay, I'd like to welcome Jessie Henshaw, who's a very valued member of our group, to give her talk on HDS, Natural Systems Design Science, GST, and People's System Science.
Good afternoon. I've tried to do a number of things on this subject, and it blew up into a number more, and so I probably won't be able to finish all that I intend here. But the basics are that the natural world is full of teleological systems. Growth is, conversations are, shopping is, every kind of natural system shows it. And I think teleology can be understood much better if put in a natural systems context. And so a people system science is something that people already know a great deal about. And we'll go more deeply into that, especially in digging into the systemic meanings expressed by the roots of all language. And you look at words, they sound like they mean something to us. Then you look at the syllables that were combined to make a word, and you realize there were meanings that the ancient pre-writing cultures, in the 10,000 years before the 5,000 years ago, when Latin and Greek popped up into view. So there's deep experiential knowledge containing in language that ordinary people are systems knowledge that ordinary people are using every time they do anything, as we all learn to use language, but we don't yet learn to use it as systems thinking. Why did physics omit all that? Why did physics, natural language has words for the beginnings and endings of things. Why did physics omit that from physics? Well, it was a difficult problem, apparently, or it seemed to be a meaningless problem, or it wasn't useful, it wasn't something, but physics left it out. So the explosion of innovation that occurs as systems emerge is the most important thing that sets the teleology of a system. Like the birth of a child is set in the first few weeks of the explosion of its cells, doubling every several days, up to 1 trillion. So there's this event at the beginning of any system that we haven't looked at yet scientifically, and I think we can if we combine forces with natural language, understanding the system references that the natural language makes. And here's an illustration, comparison of abstract learning, experiential learning, and combined. If the subject is the growth process of a normal system, which is an S curve that starts with an explosion of multiplying the original design or coincidence, and then a turning to, if it's going to stabilize, a turning to the maturation of it in relationship to a new environment. That systems develop first in an isolated environment, and then in a integrated environment. And once they mature, they go on for a period of engagement as a mature system, taking directions on and off in different ways, as adults do. And the abstract learner says, well, the shape is nice, but form and engagement have no scientific meaning. And then the experiential learner says, thank you. It's abstract, but it's also the story of how everything works. Now I know to look for the changes. And then combine, oh my, both I say, the abstraction helps me look at the contexts, and learn much more about how things work. And that's my idea anyway. It works for me and I use it. It helps a lot. I have an abstraction that has a physical basis as well as a conceptual simplicity. And then I compare that to my environment and I see, oh, the environment's doing this, the environment's doing that. And then I see much more clarity. It's like shining a light on the contextual world, which is the physical systems. And then you have words like cooperation, that's 5 syllables. So each of those means something independently. In the roots of language, they had sounds that meant something, and then in the formation of languages like Latin and Greek and others, those syllables got combined, smudged together to mean one thing, to make it take several parts and become a unity. That was the emergence of the powerful languages. I don't know how long before they were written down the languages existed. That's one of the funny things I don't think we'll ever find out. We may never find out anyway, that perhaps people were talking in complex modern language, hundreds of years before the written forms emerged, or perhaps only the written forms formalized the few words and set up patterns for the development. But and then in the case of the subject of the current explosion of our interference with nature, which is shows there was a pause for World War II. That was it. That's the only thing that held us back since 1780, when the first rotary steam engine was invented. And I set the clicker. Anyway, it's lots me to move on. So giving abstract theory and experiential theory and putting them together makes 3 new scientific methods, each working with a collaborator and together. That's the 3. And so abstraction, reconnecting with rich contexts, ending their blindness to the context in particular, which is one of the central problems of the economics and science management of growth, is they're completely blind to the context. They don't have the principle that if you push systems too far, they misbehave. And we have a global commitment to pushing our systems ever further, ever faster, and ignoring whether they misbehave or not. That's a mistake. It's a mistake. It's only a mistake. So for theorists, the most radical step may simply be taking an interest in the subject's context, the system that is self-animating and opportunistic in its behavior. That growth has to be both self-animating and opportunistic. If it wasn't opportunistic and self-animating, it wouldn't move around and find the other resources once the little tiny thimbleful was gone. And science finds so many useful rules for why we rule 5, be concerned with context. It's the slightly pejorative image of science. Scientists are not like that, though. Scientists are very curious and exploratory, but when they go to represent what their findings are in scientific languages, they separate it from nature and they cut off the contexts. And then nature is so very lively. Doesn't it make sense to make that the subject of why and how did systems become so lively? And how full of surprise nature is is a response to that. After long silences, responding energetically as things spring to life. What's not to like? Well, if it's springing to life in the wrong way, it might be. Don't they self-animate by exploding their resources? What could go wrong? And did that go up?
They went the wrong way and then
Went
back.
the wrong way.
There you go.
Okay, so lively stories. Here's two of the most amazing stories to anywhere. The one on the left is the emergence of 850,000 years ago of the genome community that produced us. This is the Homo sapien germ cell was emerged as mysteriously it was the only thing that survived some really huge catastrophe for humanity in Africa. There was a collapse of all human species except for a small part of one. And it's the mathematics is brilliant, very hard to explain how they deduced this from the variation patterns in the genomes found in by archaeologists in this time period. But there was a radical collapse to a population of about 1,200. 1,200 living creatures that were called humans. And we grew up, it's not clear that that was a tribe. That may have been an allele that was sparsely scattered, anyway. So there are events, stories like this. It's just a huge event. And the other one is one I found, diligent effort searching for what I knew had to be continuities, that evolution had to be a continuity, because evolution is a succession of growth systems. Each organism grows successfully from its seed to become an adult, and there has to be a continuity. And so in this case, we're looking at the trace of a plankton that went from a small size, 500 millimeters to 1,500 in the end, but goes by a series of leaps and collapses again and again, try again method of trying some organizational pattern. Trying is probably the wrong technical word, but it takes off again and again, and only when it reaches the highest peak at the very top and falls back does it catch itself before it collapses down to the lower level and stabilizes somehow. But this is successive iteration of an opportunistic design that fails over and over again, but then succeeds. And this is an extremely common pattern in life. It's a common pattern for us. It's a common pattern for somebody who doesn't do it. It's very common. Oh, here's another lively story, more modern. This is the beginning of what we've been talking about around here, the explosion of dissension and failure of governments and migration around the world that still accelerate. If we had this to 2024, this is only to 2019, I think, it would be up here. But so these are stories, and these have traceable histories, and there's lots of conversation about them, but we don't notice it. This is out of control. and something is driving it. What do you think might be driving this? Is it some evil empire that's chasing everybody till they go crazy? Is it what could be chasing people in a way that causes them to come into such conflict with each other, as well as their nations to fall apart? Poor Sudan. Okay, so the general model is an S curve, and the first level of detail is the germination, whether that's a coupling of some, you know, the coupling of a glass and water could multiply. That served the needs of a community who is desperate to be able to carry a glass of water around and not spill it. Any innovation happening anyway could trigger a growth process if that fits into the need of the context. And then it might grow like our economy is growing. It might grow up and up and up until it loses its purpose and collapses, or until it does what the plankton did. It comes up and says, "Oops, no, let's level off here." Or it could do what our bodies did when we were born, but there was this major reorientation from multiplying the starting pattern to starting to learn how to engage with the surrounding patterns. And that shift from explosion to I guess integration, and then engagement as the three feedbacks: the positive, negative, and then neutral, active neutral, where during a life people explore all sorts of departures from their mainstream, but they keep the mainstream.
You do it in 5 minutes, so we can.
Sure. I'll just go faster. Okay, if this is the last of this 2-slide section, the general relationship between systems is that they're centers with connections, and you may have lots of different centers with lots of different patterns of connections all in the same place. So you can't really call this a boundary, even though there are some boundaries found. You can find the boundary around the cell, like you can find a boundary around a tree, but then the tree is part of a global system. Okay, so what taught us how to understand this stuff? Why are our minds capable of understanding so much about things we don't understand? It's, basically the situation that we're very good at talking and referring to things and appreciating and noticing and all that stuff, but we are managing a system that's committing suicide. And we haven't talked about that yet. Nobody is talking about that. Not even the people who absorb themselves with the problematic all the time. They don't get to say, well, what's the feedback driving this? And well, it all seems to be with language, gives us the opportunity to talk and think about this. I'm clicking the subtab. Whoops. Well, that other picture was, here. Here's how it happened. We started in Kenya 200,000 years ago. That there was a convergence of human characteristics, modern human characteristics, the first sapien genome. And then the sapien sapiens started peeling off and going elsewhere. They went to the Middle East, and they went to the Far East, and later went to China, of course, and also went west to Greece and Italy and the rest of Europe, and from there they went north, and they went to the edges of the ice sheet and then retreated back every summer and then went north and retreated back. But in all that time, they kept their connections with the mother space, mostly here, and then going back out or going on. Actually the Silk Road is shaped like this. That's the Silk Road, and it's carrying these syllables and their meanings all over the place. And this was a little too far for it to go back and forth. But some of the early syllables are all present in 30,000 years ago or 25,000 years ago, when the Americas were seeded with humans. And here, these are some of the suffixes: ACY, like privacy, fallacy, delicacy; AL, refusal, recital, rebuttal; E/A, NCE, either ENCE or ANCE, state or quality of, maintenance, eminence, dome, place, home, or being, of freedom, kingdom, boredom, and all this other stuff. And these are the words we use all the time, and they have these super ancient elements that refer to the phenomena of life and conditions of experience and the insights of the people who were living at the time. So they must have been pretty smart. And yeah, so this is the history page where I sort of sequence all that story. And I can't go through it all, but it ends with the end of the Ice Age and then the perfecting of the advanced languages and history as we know it following that. But the whole sequence from the beginning was the beginning of thought. Thought was developing the whole time. And we are brought to that ancient development of thought in relationship to nature by our words. How do I do this? Oh, that one. Well, that one. That's the list. So reading natural systems in context. We do this when we watch kids and we see what they're doing. We do this when we watch each other and see what we're doing. We notice the signs and signals of our behaviors indicating our motivations. We project that and we guess, and with experience, we're pretty good at it. So reading the environment is a function of perception that is encoded in our language and in our experience, in our history, and then reading the design, economy's design, centers and connection. Here's an explosion. 1 second to do. Nobody seems to be asking. Why wouldn't we ask? I think we wouldn't ask because in the dawn of science, before there were any scientists, there was a fellow named Thales who was a very successful merchant marineman, had a ship and traveled the Mediterranean and went to all the ports learning mathematics and got back home having picked up apparently some of the mathematics from Babylon, which there's more to talk about there, but he made a killing on the olive market, and that's what kicked off science. People were very envious of him, and he did this brilliant thing, and it kicked off a lot of other things than economic use of science. Economic use of science didn't get recorded very well, however, and it blew up the world. The aesthetic exploration of science, which the famous scientists did, also help blow up the world, but that was more for enlightenment. It was the non-enlightenment use of science that really is blowing up the world today. Okay, well, there's the end. To schedule a group discussion, write me at sci@synapse9.com. I'd love to talk at more length with any number of groups of people.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? We have just a few minutes, 3 minutes.
I'll step up from the outside. Jesse, thank you so very, very much. There's a wide-ranging presentation, a compilation of a lot of your ideas, and I really applaud you on your emphasis on what language is. Bertalanffy found it very crucially important, even though he didn't present it much in most of his interactions with the rest of general systems, but he did devote a chapter to Benjamin Whorf, which was strictly languaging and getting into the weeds of understanding how we live and understand things. So you're pinpointing that now is very, very critically important and something that I hope you continue to stress and share with the rest of our colleagues, because we are very glib and we use language automatically, autonomically, as it might be, without thinking about the sources and the understandings that went into building the languages, which give us key information and concepts and understanding. So thank you very much for your presentation today, Jesse.
Thank you, Jamie. It's distinguishing between the parts of our language that refer to something observable or experienced rather than something abstract and fictitious that I think is important. Not every abstraction is malicious, but boy, do we have a lot of them.
And as systems thinkers, we have the obligation to be very careful and listen and know the distinguish between the circumstances, I think. Would you say that's right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you can't be responsible unless you understand something, but yeah, if we want to have influence, we should understand the root meanings of words, use them so that we'll be understood by other people.
Yeah, try and tell a teenager to do that. I don't think they'd have the time.
I think they would understand. They're pretty smart.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to thank our speaker. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.